Okay, so in this video we're going to implement one of our last puzzle pieces of the game, which is our timer. So first let's just set that up in our user interface. So what we'll do is, if you see here, we have a remote panel and then a remote texture. We don't want I want the timer to be above this texture, so we'll put it under the remote panel, but not under the remote texture. So create a UI, and I'm going to use a slider for this. So I'm going to make sure that is in the right spot, and I'm going to anchor it to the top. So I'm going to go like this, and then we can remember that our height for this is it's like a fixed length. So this here I think is 75. So if I hit -75, oh no, this is going to center me down. Oh right. So positive y, I want to be like negative. Maybe is it 50? -25. So maybe it was 75, and -32, 7.5. I think that works. And then I want to come in from the left and the right. I don't want it to go all the way here, so I can come in 75 here and come in 75 from the right. And we mostly have our slider set up already. So we'll have a max value. I'm going to do not whole numbers for this one, because we want the timer to just be smooth. So we'll have a min and max value. I'm going to set it to 8. Nice even number. And right, I want to go from left to right, so that works. So I will name this timer slider, and I have a few sprites set aside for this. So if we look in UI sprites, we have this volume, what's this, remote timer fill. And so we can set the background image to be this remote timer fill, and we can set the color of this. So I thought it would be nice to have like a bluish sort of color. So I'm going to set it, and I want to distinguish both of these. Oh, actually I want the background to be sort of black, and then the let's see how I want it. Nope. And then the fill area to actually be blue. So I'm going to see what sort of looks good. 50. I think that'll work for now. And then for the fill area, I'm gonna do the same thing with this image. I'm going to have that same sort of gradient, but instead I want to make it like a bluish color. There we go. It's kind of nice. We don't need our handle, but our timer slider is going to complain if we don't have one. So what we can do is we can just change it so that the image doesn't show, and then we can just ignore the handle there. So I made a few little things. I want to sort of block out make it like sort of conform to the edges of this. So I made this little triangle thing, and that's just there so that I can block the left and right. I could have made this shape into a trapezoid, but how the fill area works is actually like sort of scaling the image. So if I do this, like the trapezoid would get larger and smaller and it won't look right. So instead, I've sort of hacked a way to just create an image. Image. Actually, maybe we should make an image under. We want it to be above everything, so let's make an image under timer slider, and let's set it whatever the width of this is, so maybe like 75, and then change the image to be this sort of triangle. I want to go all the way. I want to maybe like hook it to the top left corner, but come in, that's a width, so maybe come in negative 75, negative 37, 5. Yeah, that's pretty close. And then just make sure that our color matches this background. So now it kind of gives us that trapezoidal look, but without having to deal with shapes being like scaled weird. That works well for rectangles, but not so well for shapes that are not rectangles. I'm going to rename this like triangle blocker, something like that, and I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm going to rotate it on the z-axis by 180, and then I want to anchor it to the left part, so I'll do keep the width of 75. Oh, actually, I don't want to rotate it 180. I want to, not by the z-axis, I want to rotate strangely on the y-axis, so it's like it's mirrored, right? So 180. There we go. And then we need to come in on position x, like 37.5 or something like that. I think that's going to work even if we scale it. Yep. Because this border is always the same 75 width. Cool. Just as some added polish, we can make this not interactable, so like we don't have a handle anyway, but just to make sure that the player isn't messing with how much time, we only do that through script. We've got background, and you may notice I have like something that we can use to make the color flash a little bit. So I've in the assets bundle, I've provided a color swapper, so we don't have to do the script on that. We can just put it in the handle, the fill area, in the fill. And we can drop it here, and we can switch what colors we want to go between. So color 1, I'm going to keep the same. Color 2, I can paste and then like maybe modify it a little bit lighter or something. So now it'll be like kind of blinking back and forth. Maybe we want this like a little darker. Actually, we can just see this in the editor. Yeah, so I'll copy that. So now it should be blinking between the two. Oops, nope, I have a swap speed of 0, so make sure that's like 1 second to swap between them. It's a little too much, so I'm gonna make it a swap of maybe 5 seconds and also make the difference not so drastic. So if I paste and then I edit the color just to be slightly lighter. Let's see how that looks. Oh, this is a... Okay, so I want to... It's not in seconds. I can open this up to see how... Soft speed. So the faster this is... Okay, so the larger the number, the faster it's going to switch. So maybe by 0.25 or something. Let's see. Maybe too subtle. Let's up this a little bit. Yeah, I'm gonna do this like 0.5. There we go. I like that better. Cool. So we have our timer set up. Max at 8 for default, and now we can go into our game manager script and implement this. So this is the first thing we're going to do on an update. So we'll do void timer. Just to keep organized, I'm going to make a function that handles the timer stuff, and then in update we're going to call the function. It's the same as having this code at the top of the update. All right, so our timer, if so what do we want? So we want to keep decrementing our time based on how much time has occurred in the scene. So what I'll do is I'll say we need to specify some floats up here. So we can say float time left, max time. So how much time is left and how much is the max value of the slider. So that way when we reset, we can reset it to our max time. And I think what we'll do is, what we can do is, we also need to specify our slider, so that we can move the slider the value of the slider depending on the time left. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to say using Unity Engine .ui, and then here I'm going to specify a slider, and it's going to be called timer slider, and I'm going to find the timer slider here with game object find. And I'm going to find, we named it timer slider with a capital. And from that object, we're going to get the component slider. We also want to set the default value of our max time and the time left. So we'll find the timer slider dot, we can get the max value from that, and we'll set that to max time. Okay, and then our time left is going to default as the script starts to max time. So if we've been messing around in the editor and we change the value of this to like 1, that way when the game starts, it doesn't start with just 1 second left. It'll always start with whatever the max value is, so with 8. Okay. So timer. All right, so now that we've specified time left and max time and our timer slider. As we're going through the timer, we want to decrement time left, so we can do a minus equals instead of a plus equals. So whatever time left's value is, I'm going to subtract that by time dot delta time, and that is time in seconds it took to complete the last frame. So every frame, this is being called because it's on update. So we find how long each frame takes, and then we subtract that amount from our time left, and it gives us a nice little timer countdown. Oops, I don't need parentheses. And now we get our slider, and we change the value on update to whatever we've just found for our time left. And then we can set, we already have this failed state here, so if the timer has reached 0, we can check that. If time left is less than or equal to 0, then we can call our failed. Okay, cool. So we can test this out and see if it starts decreasing. What's going on? So if time left, time left equals max time. Oh, I see. So we actually need to, so we're setting this to our max time, but we haven't set max time to be default of anything, so my bad. So I'm going to make at least this one a public float. Max time. We can actually probably make both of these public just to see the value and test it, and then we can change it later. So when we go back into our game manager, we want our max time to be default at 8, time left doesn't really matter, and then we can see that the timer goes down. Okay, so it should give us like a failed state, except for it's not going to have like a game over because we deactivated that for now. But what we need to do is if we have a win state, we need to sort of reset the timer so that it doesn't keep decrementing. So what we're going to do is in our timer function, we're going to specify when and when not to pause. So I'm going to set a bool up here, not a boo, a bool, which is whether or not we've paused the timer. And default that to false. And what we want to do is, we want to check on timer as long as we haven't paused the timer. There we go. Then we do everything in timer. So. Or, you know, we could even bring this out and put it in update. But let's keep update clean. All right. And so we can pause the timer anytime we've cleared an objective. So if we on objective cleared, if we say if we pause the timer and reset the timer to equal whatever the max time, we can do that on an objective cleared. But there's a certain amount of time that we want it to be paused, and that is depending on how much time we're taking between this objective cleared, showing our little animation on the screen. We want to pause it as immediately when you win. Let the animation play out. Let the old lady animation play out. If there's more than 4 wins, then she's going to be happy and do her animation. So it's dependent on a couple of different things. So what we can do is we can create another iEnumerator called pause timer with a capital P, so it's going to be different than our bool, which has a lowercase p. And we're going to feed in some amount of time to wait. So each iEnumerator needs to return and yield something, so we're going to wait for seconds, whatever our wait time is. And then before and after our wait time, we're going to set pause timer to be true and false, not true. And this is going to be false. Jesus. Okay. So in this coroutine, whenever we pause a timer, there's never really a use case where we want to pause the timer and then have it going after it's done being paused. So what we'll do is we'll do another function, reset timer, and we'll call that right here. So reset timer. So anytime that we call pause timer or reset timer is also going to be called. And so reset timer is just going to, it's going to set our time left, reset that, and make sure that it's equal to our max time. Okay. And so after we've all right, so now after we've cleared our objective, we're going to wait, we're going to pause the timer and wait for a certain amount of time. So we're sending a message from each of our modular control classes whichever one is activated. When they've won, we've sent a message that objective cleared. So what we can do to know how much time we need to pause is we'll specify that we've already done animation time. We'll feed in that animation time to objective cleared so we know how long we need to wait for. What I'll do is so I'm going to feed in a float. We'll get the animation time, and then so there's a couple use cases here. So it hasn't reached 4, but we need to pause for a certain amount of seconds animation time. So we can start our coroutine, pause timer, and we'll feed in the animation time. And then there's also a use case up here in which we want to first do the same thing. We pause based on the animation time. Then we want to pause again to see for how long that she does her little happy animation. So there's even another specified amount of time that we need to pause after this one. So There's going to be sort of a little strange way how we're going to do this. We're going to specify another float, which will be our happy animation time. I think I'm going to separate it over here, float. And I think we can set a default to I forgot what I set it to before, maybe like 5. That might be way too long. But we'll see. Okay, so we've got happy animation time for how long the old lady's animation goes for. So we can set it here. You know, I'll make that public too, so we can just mess around with it. And so we'll set her trigger to be happy before we pause it. Actually, this is going to we're going to need a little bit. We need to flesh this out a little bit more, because after this, then we have to, even though the coroutine is based on the time, the code keeps going through these. Oh. So actually what we're doing here is if we start a coroutine and then immediately at the same time we're going to be setting the trigger to happy, which is not what we want. So there's going to be a little weird way how we can solve this. Is like we can trigger some sort of function or action within our coroutine and do so we can update our pause timer to do something after we've paused it, which is a little bit strange. So we can say, we can feed in what's called action, and actually to be able to use that, we need to go up here and say that we need to be using our system. So now we can pause timer, feed in something else. We can feed in action, and we'll say what's our next action that we want to do. And then we can, after our wait, after however specified amount of time that we pause, we can then do our next action. So we feed in a function to our coroutine, and then that function is going to be called at the end of the coroutine. So if wins is less than 4 and we don't do the little animation, then we can call our next objective. So we can say animation time, and then also we want to do the next objective, which have we not we've not done that yet. Okay, so we'll have a void over here where we're going to call the next objective that we want. So what this function is going to do is so this will be, we have in our modular controller, we have the set objective, so it's going to randomly pick one of our panels, and it's going to call set objective from that panel. Okay, and I forget how to do this. Sorry, I need to be zoomed in. I apologize. So, oh, okay. So we don't need to feed in the parentheses for this. Okay, that's nice. All right, so if there is some amount of wins, we want to do animation time like we've done here, but rather than do the next objective. So what I'm imagining is after every 4 actions that you do, you speed up the timer so that it goes faster. So we can do that over here, and we're going to do, just call it speed up. This one's a simple one. I don't want P to be capitalized. Then we can set, since we want this to happen after however long we pause the timer, we can set the trigger of happy in here, because every time we speed up, we're gonna tie the 2 things together. So anytime we speed up, anytime you've done well enough to do 4 in a row or whatever, she's gonna be happy, and also you're going to speed things up. And then we can increase the speed simply by doing changing the time scale. So time scale, and we can add 0.25 ended up being a nice number. So we can add make it 1.25 speed for the first 4, 1.5. So after you've done 16, it'll be twice as fast. And that ended up being pretty nice. So after this action, we can do speed up. And now we just need to figure out what we want, if we want anything to happen after we do happy animation time. So we've sped it up and we've waited a certain amount of time. Now she's happy and she wants to pause the timer for a few seconds before we start moving on to the next objective. So we can do next objective up here. Okay, and this is formatted a little weird. Okay, so we're not setting the next objective yet. What else do we need? So we did pause timer, and then our next objective. Okay, let's try this out. So if we get a win state, oh, you know what? In our modular control, we have to remember when we're sending a message, objective cleared, we also need to send in how long to wait. So game manager send message, and then also an animation time. And now game manager will know to wait a certain amount of time. Now we can test it out. So 68, you should hit a win state, and then it's pause the timer, should reset it, and then go back. Sweet. Cool. So that's our timer implementation. Next time we can start switching between different objectives, but I think we can make one more of these panels before we do that. So I think we'll implement a volume slider next.